With me now is Babak Imamian, political analyst and economist, to discuss whether Europe's defence investments are matching its strategic needs. A very warm welcome, sir, to the programme, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. Sir, NATO's 5% target is unprecedented. Are member states treating it as a serious defence plan or a political box-ticking exercise?
Well, if you look at it, since the World War II, Europe has not had its own army. It has had NATO as its army, controlled by USA. Now, since the collapse of Soviet Union in 1992, NATO has lost its purpose in a way. But by now, NATO in 2025 has become Europe's foreign policy. NATO has become Europe's defense policy. And recently, NATO has become its domestic policy. If you look at it, all the conferences since the Ukraine war in Europe has been NATO conferences. Even today's press conference by Merz and Zelensky, it was a NATO press conference. So what I'm trying to say is NATO is totally in charge of Europe now. So in a way, we could say Europe is under a military rule right now. And they are using the threat of Russia as increasing military spending to rebuild their infrastructure. So the whole idea of building Europe's infrastructure is to help its military goals, what you hear. So that's what I'm trying to say. And it all comes from because the European leaders are mostly young, inexperienced, and weak. That's why now NATO has totally
young, inexperienced, and weak?
Yes, indeed. Most of them, first of all, Europe suffers from short-term governments. So all they care about, the politicians, how to win elections. And they spend all their efforts and energy to win elections.
And after they win elections, sir, what do?
They go on holiday.
On a holiday?
Yes, look at the governance. The governance is mostly holiday. They're not governing. They're just making speeches. They're not making serious decisions. They're not committing to anything. So to them, governance is holiday. Winning elections is a serious business. And that's what Europe is suffering from.
Italy's $15.6 billion Strait of Messina bridge is being labeled dual-use infrastructure. Does that cross the line from strategic planning into strategic theater, sir?
Well, thank you for that question. We go back to, again, rebuilding infrastructure. Now, in 2005, 20 years ago, the Chinese economy was smaller than the British economy. 25 years later, the Chinese economy is 6 times the British economy. The reason is because the China invested $5 trillion in its infrastructure after 2005. And suddenly its economy went up. Now the European leaders could do that, but because they are weak, intellectually also weak, they have no purpose, they are there for a short time, so they never committed to such development, none of the European countries. And now, again, I go back to what I said. They are using the threat of Russia to rebuild their infrastructure, which is dishonest way of doing things. You could actually do it in a very honest way. Say, we need to build this. We need to spend $5 trillion on Europe's infrastructure in order to improve our economy and double it in next 20 years.
Sir, if Europe's ports and rail hubs remain bottlenecks, what happens in a real war scenario on NATO's eastern flank, sir?
Well, the first line of defense is economy. If you have a weak economy, you cannot have a great defense. And if you look at it, we are going through the third phase of globalization. The first phase of globalization started in 1992 after the collapse of Soviet Union, when all the jobs went to China. So the jobs went to China from 1992 to 2016. Then during first term of President Trump, he changed that model. So we had globalization 2.0, the second phase, which was the jobs going everywhere. Then there was 4 years gap, and now in 2025, we are at globalization 3.0, the third phase, where all the jobs are going to USA. For example, Germany car makers. It is cheaper for them to manufacture cars in America because it's cheaper energy, less regulation, friendly business environment, less labor laws regulation, and there is no tariff if they want to re-export to Europe. And also there is no tariff while they are producing in US. So if you are a German car manufacturer, not only you would have access to a large market in USA by shifting your manufacturing from Germany to USA, and you would have cheaper energy, friendly environment, more investment, 17 trillion of investment going into USA, so they want part of that money. So you would think, I want to shift our manufacturing to US, and then we get to a stage where in a couple of years, it is cheaper for the German production to be producing US and re-exporting to Europe. The point I'm trying to make, never mind the roads, never mind the ports, unless the Europe readjust its business model, then there is grave and very difficult times ahead of them, economically and socially.
Sir, throughout our lives and history, we all know that, of course, Germany or German cars made in Germany were the best cars all over the world. Am I right or am I wrong? Today, of course, China took over in a way, but it's still a Chinese car. It's not a German car, which we're discussing, of course, different type of cars. How do you read this, and why is this happening today? Chinese cars are much cheaper than German cars, but now you're mentioning a total different geodynamic, which we were discussing with our first guest politically, which is Germany is now manufacturing cars in the United States of America. So everything literally is changing.
Everything is changing. Then again, it comes to weak leadership and having no plan. And the Europeans, for the last 17 years, since 2008 financial crash, they've had weak leadership, one after another, with no plan. And you could see that even in terms of geopolitics. The disastrous 2011 Libya, 2014 in Syria and ISIS, 2015 the Iran nuclear deal, 2016 Brexit, 2017 you had the Chinese 5G infiltration in entire Europe. And you could just work it out right to now. We have the Ukraine war. So the weak leadership in Europe, not only it's got its economies wrong, but it has its geopolitics wrong.
Got your point. Sir, should NATO impose a strict definition of what counts as defense infrastructure, and who should enforce it?
Well, again, going back to your point, they are using the defense spending as reindustrialization and rebuilding their infrastructure, which I think is a very dishonest way of doing that. The people in Europe are very decent and very clever people, and you don't need to use tactics like that to get you to your goals. You can be honest with them, and they would work with you. Similarly, this is what, as you were talking about, the Chinese. The Chinese have been transparent about their goals. They invest hugely in infrastructure. They work very hard, and they're ambitious. Same thing in Europe. But then the politicians are not honest. They're not transparent. People are honest. People are ambitious in Europe, and people work hard, but their leaders are not.
Sir Babak Imamian, thank you for your analysis. And it was really fascinating, sir. And thank you for your valuable time and for your intellectual, informative knowledge. In an era of rising threats, Europe's ability to defend itself will hinge not just on how much it spends, but how smartly it invests. From diplomatic brinkmanship in Alaska to the steel and concrete of Europe's supply lines, the message is clear. Peace talks without preparation are as dangerous as armies without mobility. Europe's next decade will demand both political clarity and military capability, and failing on either front could leave the continent dangerously exposed. This was In Focus. I'm Rana Al-Qassas, and I thank you very much for watching. Coming up next is our news bulletin. Stay tuned and don't go away. Thank you very much for watching.